We have an opening prayer today. I don't know where Danny is. Is anybody? Danny Palmer. What? She is? Oh, well, she's supposed to come and give the opening prayer. So, Loretta, could you run and get her? Thank you. And so we're going to have an opening prayer in just a minute. And we do need to start. So we're just going to start with whoever's in this room. And hopefully starting will get people here. We have people on a tight schedule today. So we'll have an opening prayer by Danny Palmer. After the opening prayer, we're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance and the flag by Craig Thorne. And after that, the national anthem. And our sweet young woman who, with her beautiful voice, that was going to sing for us this morning has laryngitis, but her mother is here, and she's going to lead all of us singing. So we'll start with Danny, and then let's see, Craig. Do we have? I better make sure everybody's in the room before we start. Craig Thorne, where is Craig? If you'll come up here at the front, please. And then we need Kristen. Okay, we have a problem here. Okay, Craig Thorne, please, and then Kristen, if you could come forward. So Loretta, somebody's got to go get Kristen, and somebody has to go get Craig, because it is time to start. Yep, we're looking for you, and now all we need is Craig. Well, I know Craig is here. We might have to ask somebody else to lead the pledge, because we just have to start. Oh, okay. I hate to do that to Craig. He came here just to do this today, but yeah. So we do have a full day, so we'll just take us a minute to talk about. We're going to move quickly. A lot of great speakers, and we're really blessed for that. And I want to thank every one of you for being here today. The room is going to be completely full. We sold out a few days ago. We put some chairs in the back, and we have people that have actually already bought those chairs. But so, did you find him, Loretta? So where's David? He could call him. Okay. Okay. Oh, there he is. Okay. All right. So, as I said, we'll start with Danny Palmer with the opening prayer, Craig Thorne, who will do the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we will have Kristen Ritchie, who will lead us in singing the national anthem.
Our Heavenly Father, we are so grateful to Thee to be able to live in this country with the freedoms that we have, but also with the responsibilities that we have with this freedom to protect it and to prepare for Thy second coming. We pray that each of us, as we attend this conference today, will be guided in ways that we can protect our freedoms. We pray that each person in Thy service will be strengthened to carry the loads that they carry in their lives. We pray that Thou will bless each of us to know and do those things that Thou would have us do. We pray that the speakers today will be inspired to say the things that Thou would have them say, and to have the love of the freedom instilled in their hearts, We pray these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our singer today was plagued with laryngitis last night, so we can solve that. We can do it together. Please stand and join me in singing our national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Thank you.
So today, Mike Lee is not able to join us in person. He had something that he had to be, where he had to be, but he's going to join us on Zoom. So he'll be here live. It'll just be Zoom again. Okay, it'll be just be 2 minutes, and then we will, huh? Okay, so if the rest of you out there want to come in, I think that would be a great thing. Anyway, as you look at what we have going today, it's just amazing. All the people that have agreed to be here, our congressmen, all four of our congressmen, Mike Lee, the best way he could be here. And we're grateful for that, and grateful that we have elected officials who want to come and who want to participate and want to bring you their message. And we're grateful for all of you for being here. But I also want to tell you about our amazing volunteers that have put this all together. I've had some tragedies in my life right now, and I have been gone. I've been out of town. And they have done all this work in spite of me. And it's been unusual, this whole thing. And I'm so grateful for them, so grateful for every one of them. They're on the program. So anyway, now we can go to Mike. All right, I'm going to let Mike just take it from here.
Andrew, Zoom.
Can you hear me? Hello.
We can hear you.
Thanks so much. Thank you for letting me join you this morning. I wish I could be there in person, but it's an honor to be invited to speak to some of my favorite people in the state of Utah. The Eagle Forum is, for many, many decades, stood for what our country believes in. And so many of you have been very helpful to me in countless ways, not only as I've campaigned, but also as I go through the day-to-day process of legislating, of passing good legislation, stopping bad legislation. So many of you have been there for me, and I deeply appreciate that. I want to talk to you a little bit today about where we are, how we got here, and where we need to go from here. I talk from time to time about the fact that we've departed from our constitutional moorings, and we have, but it's always worth reviewing exactly why this happened, why it is that we're in a condition in which we're $34 trillion in debt, in which Americans have to work for 3 or 4 months out of every year just to pay their federal taxes, only to be told that that's not nearly enough because we're $34 trillion in debt. About why it is that we now face this Byzantine labyrinth of federal regulations that requires Americans to shell out $2 to $3 trillion a year in regulatory compliance costs. Now, these are not big blue chip corporations having to shell out that money. These are ordinary Americans who pay for those regulations through higher prices on goods and services and diminished wages, unemployment, and underemployment. We have a government that has the responsibility of making sure that we remain a country by, among other things, enforcing our border. And yet it refuses to do those things, even as it's doing all sorts of things that it was never intended to do. In my view, all of this relates back to one pivotal and I believe tragic day in American history, a day that is almost never talked about anywhere. The date is April 12th, 1937. That's the day when the Supreme Court decided a case called National Labor Relations Board versus Jones and Laughlin Steel Company. In that case, the Supreme Court reinterpreted, it reimagined, it amended, it rewrote Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the Constitution. You'll know that as the Commerce Clause. It gives Congress the power, among other things, to regulate trade or commerce between the states. Prior to 1937, that provision had always been understood to give Congress the power to regulate interstate commercial transactions. If you've got a farmer in Virginia who grows crops to sell to a consumer in Maryland or a distributor in Maryland, that transaction can be covered by federal law. It was also interpreted and understood as covering what we call channels or instrumentalities of interstate commerce, interstate airways, airwaves, waterways, canals, and so forth. The corridors through which things in commerce travel in interstate commerce. That was it, really just those two categories. This is part and parcel of what the founding fathers understood from the outset. The fundamental structure of the Constitution is the single most important feature of it. In American society, we continued to accept the false notion that the Constitution is best understood by reference to its amendments, by reference principally to the Bill of Rights. Those are important. I'm glad that they're there. But without these structural protections in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights and the other substantive limitations in the Constitution would mean nothing, because they mean nothing in the absence of structural protections guaranteeing the people against the excessive accumulation of power in the hands of the few. So as some of you have heard me say before, there are twin structural protections. One is vertical, we call that federalism. The other is horizontal, we call that separation of powers. The three branches, one makes the laws, one enforces them, or is supposed to, and the other interprets them. As long as each branch of the federal government remains in its lane, and there's a proper understanding of what power is federal and what power belongs to the states and localities, our system has worked well and it's thrived. It's this system that James Madison described when he said in Federalist number 45 that the powers of Congress, therefore the powers of the federal government, are few and defined. Those reserved to the states are numerous and indefinite. Well, on April 12, 1937, when the Supreme Court decided NLRB versus Jones and Laughlin Steel, it set us on a course that inevitably led to the destruction of both the vertical protection of federalism and the horizontal protection of separation of powers. Here's how it happened. The minute the Supreme Court decided that case, it expanded the Commerce Clause so as to mean Congress could regulate any and every activity that, when measured in the aggregate, when replicated across every state, could be understood as having a substantial effect on interstate commerce. In other words, they amended the Constitution so as to say Congress will not only have the power to regulate interstate commerce, but it'll have the power to regulate anything that affects commerce, any economic activity with a commercial impact. And, you know, if you need interpretation services from the legalese, what that means is Congress can regulate any darn thing it wants as long as it has half competent lawyers in order to write it out and spell out the connection between what it wants to regulate and some kind of economic impact that can be felt across the states. So why is that so important? Why should any of us care? All right, well, a couple of things happened right after that case was decided. Number one, all of a sudden, Congress found itself newly possessed with the power to regulate labor, manufacturing, agriculture, mining, health, safety, welfare, just about anything government touches. Prior to that time, those things could be regulated only under special circumstances, only where, for example, you had labor, manufacturing, agriculture, mining, or one of those other things occurring across state lines. No longer. All of a sudden, if Congress could dream it, if Congress could write it, Congress could regulate it. The second thing that happened, and by the way, in that first step, we more or less destroyed federalism. Federalism, as embodied in the original Constitution and as made abundantly clear in the 10th Amendment, kind of was flipped on its head. So James Madison's description in Federalist 45 of the powers of the federal government being few and defined and those reserved to the states, numerous and indefinite, they turned on their head. The powers of the federal government are now numerous and indefinite. And the states, by default, get whatever is left over. Now, it's not that state governments can't make mistakes. They certainly do. You can look to any state in the union, starting with disasters like California, but even including better run states like ours. They make a lot of mistakes. But the difference is we can turn those around faster. The people can turn those around when they want to. It's much harder to do that with the federal government. So that was step one. We undermined federalism severely. Step two, occurring as a result of the destruction, the deterioration, the weakening of federalism, we severely weakened separation of powers. Here's how that happened. As soon as Congress found itself newly possessed of all this power, being able to regulate labor, manufacturing, agriculture, mining, health, safety, and welfare, as long as it drafted it correctly, Congress panicked because Congress knew, first of all, we'd have to do a whole lot more work. Lawmaking is tough business. You've got to write down all these details. And what goes along with that is that you're more accountable to more people. You've got more people angry. Anytime you pass a law, you might make one group of people happy. You make a whole lot of others really, really mad, and with good reason. So as a result of all this, Congress decided to start outsourcing the lawmaking task. And we started passing laws that look sort of like the Clean Air Act, which has some good things behind it, and in some circumstances is appropriate for federal legislation. But it says basically, we shall have clean air, and we hereby delegate to the EPA the power to decide what clean air is, what pollution is, and how much anyone can pollute and what the punishments will be. And by the way, the same people writing those same laws will be the same people enforcing those laws. And by the way, those same people will never stand for election No one will even know them. They're nameless, faceless bureaucrats as far as the American people are concerned. This channels another warning issued in the Federalist Papers, also by James Madison, Federalist number 62. Madison said, in essence, I'm paraphrasing here, but this is pretty close to the original text. It will be of little avail to the American people if their laws be written by men of their own choosing, if those laws be so voluminous, complex, and ever-changing that the citizens can't understand from day to day what the law is today and what it might become tomorrow. Today, we find ourselves in exactly that circumstance. The laws are so voluminous and ever-changing. They are fluctuating so much that you can't always know whether your behavior is lawful. Just take our tax code, for example. I had in front of the Joint Economic Committee, which I was chairing at the time, a few years ago, I had an expert in the U.S. tax code. This guy had a PhD in the U.S. tax code. I suppose there should be blessings in heaven for somebody willing to pursue a PhD in the U.S. tax code. That sounds torturous to me, but he was a PhD. He was an expert, and I asked him on the stand, "Sir, do you do your own taxes?" And he said, "No, I do not prepare my own taxes. Why? Because I would never be able to know for sure whether I got it right." This is a guy with a PhD, a nationally recognized expert in the tax code, because our laws are so voluminous and complex, but it's so much worse than this. Those laws are just the tip of the iceberg. Most of our laws, in addition to being too voluminous, complex, and ever-changing, they're not even written by men and women of our own choosing. Also, a few years ago, as a member of the Judiciary Committee, I and some of my colleagues reached out and asked the question, how many federal criminal laws are on the books? How many federal crimes are there? How many criminal actions can one undertake, or actions can one undertake that will result in a federal criminal law being violated? The answer came back from the Congressional Research Service, whose job it is to do those very things, to answer those very questions. And their answer was stunning. They said, in effect, the answer is unknown and unknowable, but get this, it's at least 300,000. There are at least 300,000 federal criminal offenses on the books. But they said the reason why it's unknown and unknowable is because so many of those laws were put in place by regulations. Federal regulators, nameless, faceless bureaucrats. This is really stunning. This is how people get put in prison, like the Millses. I've told the story at times in the past. The father and son duo, the last name of Mills, developed property in Florida's Escambia Bay. They did all the necessary permitting, did everything they were supposed to do. One day they get a visit from some federal law enforcement officials who told them, as they had started digging the foundation after getting all the necessary permits to some of these homes, they said, "Oh, unfortunately for you, we consider this a federal wetland, and under the Clean Water Act, the Federal Clean Water Act, and the implementing regulations, you've committed a crime." They both spent 2 or 3 years in federal prison, not having any idea they had done anything wrong. They followed all the rules as far as they were aware. This is the sort of thing that happens when you entrust the lawmaking to unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats. Inevitably, when things like that happen and a federal regulation has been violated and somebody loses life, liberty, or property as a result, people go to their members of Congress, their senators, their representatives, because they're elected. You can fire representatives every 2 years. You can fire a third of your senators every 2 years. You cannot fire federal bureaucrats. But when you take it to your senators and your representatives, they tend to say, "Yeah, do you know, those guys over at that regulatory body that you're talking about, they are barbarians. And do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write them a harshly worded letter, as if that were our job." But it's important to remember that the very first operative provision of the Constitution, after the preamble, Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1, says all legislative powers in the federal government shall be vested in Congress, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. Article 1, Section 7 makes doubly clear that you cannot make a federal law except by moving it through the House and the Senate, meaning both the House and the Senate has to pass the exact same legislative text. It's cumbersome, it's time consuming, it's difficult. It somehow gets done in some circumstances, but it's hard. And a lot of stuff fails. Most bills do fail, as well they should. But it's much more efficient if Congress can just pass a law saying we shall have good law in area X, and we hereby delegate to Commission Y the power to make, interpret, and enforce laws in area X. This is a recipe for tyranny, and this is the tyranny under which we live, the tyranny that costs the American economy and hardworking Americans, poor and middle class Americans, $2 to $3 trillion a year. This is wrong. And by the way, this is also exactly the reason. This is at the heart, the core of the problem of why we've got this massive influx of illegal immigration, why we've had like 12 million people invading our country. And yes, this is an invasion. Not all invasions are carried out by armies that are uniformed, trained, and armed. Some invasions just occur when one group of people enters another country not pursuant to that country's laws. Certainly by the time you get to the people coming in to the tune of 10 to 12 million within less than 3 years, that is the case. What does that have to do with April 12th, 1937, in NLRB versus Jones and Laughlin Steel, and the deterioration of federalism, the corresponding deterioration of separation of powers that resulted from our expansion of federal power? It has everything to do with it. Because governments, remember, are a little bit like teenagers. They get in trouble and they do bad things when they stop doing the things that they're supposed to do. That's when they start doing things that they're not supposed to do. And when they're doing things they're not supposed to do, they don't do the things that they are supposed to do well at all. So how do we get out of it? I didn't appear this morning to talk to you, to depress you, but to give you hope. I don't want you to think that this is overly simplistic, but I'm going to give you a very simple answer of how we begin to turn the tide. I believe we can start moving things in the right direction with the passage of one single bill. That bill is called the REINS Act. That's an acronym, Regulations from the Executive in Need of Scrutiny. The REINS Act it would require as a procedural matter that we comply with what Article 1, Section 7 already requires, which is that no law may take effect in the United States if it is a federal law, unless it has been passed by both houses of Congress. Now, the REINS Act has been around for more than a decade. It was actually introduced before I even arrived in the United States Senate. It's not even my bill at this point. And yet, if a genie appeared to me and said, I will put into force any law, any bill that you want, I'll make it pass, it would be the REINS Act. I'm in the process right now of reformulating the REINS Act, adding some new provisions, including, among other things, an affirmative defense that would allow someone, before they can be deprived of life, liberty, or property for violating any law, you should be able to raise as an affirmative defense. I was not put on notice by a statute affirmatively passed into law by Congress, and therefore cannot be held accountable under this law. These and other provisions will make the REINS Act even more capable of helping us get the ball rolling toward restoring federalism and separation of powers. And as we restore federalism and separation of powers, we'll not only protect liberty, we'll not only protect the American people in their ability to live in an environment where they can expect that their rights, from religious freedom to free speech, to be respected. But we will also know, yes, I've got 5 minutes. I'll stay within that. Thank you. But we will restore some of those protections, because when you protect the people against the dangerous accumulation of power in the hands of the few, you're also protecting these individual liberties. But in addition to these things, we will also make the federal government more capable of doing that which only the federal government can do, like enforcing our border. and providing for our national defense. All of these things will be made better if we can get this one thing rolling. So if anyone within the sound of my voice agrees with this, if it resonates with you, I'd encourage you to continue to study it out. Don't take my word for it. Look into it. Make sure it's legit. Please help me spread the word on this. But regardless of who occupies any single office in the United States, if we can pass the REINS Act, this will work because the American people will be in charge of their own government once again. Sometimes the people choose what's wrong, but that's unusual. Most of the time, our government is in good hands when it's in the hands of the people. I hope and pray that that will always be the case. We've been given a document written by wise men raised up by Almighty God to that very purpose. That document protects liberty to the greatest extent liberty can be protected in this land, and I hope and pray we will always respect that. The REINS Act will help us get there. Thank you.
Hi, Mike. Do you have time for questions?
I hear lots of echoing, but thank you guys.
All right. Well, actually gonna move on.
So thank you, Mike. It was great. You did just what we asked.
No questions?
No
Thank you.
questions, yeah. So before we go on, I have a bit of a problem. I'm sitting right there, and I have to get back up here. And as you can see, I'm completely pinned in. So if there's any way, and I don't know what that would be, to move a chair or two.
Move the stairs over. What if we just
Oh,
move the stairs
that's
over
a
there?
big deal, moving the stairs.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, we should be okay.
I still won't be able to get through right there, but I will work that out.
No, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, we'll see how that
Sorry,
works.
so
And then
squishy,
maybe I'll
guys.
sit someplace else.
Come on,
Anyway, Mike Lee is wonderful. We are absolutely so blessed to have somebody. There's nobody in the Senate with the knowledge that Mike Lee has of the Constitution, and we are blessed that he is there. I have lots of friends that are there, and senators from other states, and they all say the same thing. They tell us that they look to Mike for the answers that have to do with the Constitution. Anyway, we're going to move on. I can see that we have Blake Moore is already here. We're grateful to have Congressman Moore with us today. After Congressman Moore, we will have John Curtis, and he is in the back. And I just want to tell both of you how much I appreciate you and how much I appreciate you coming today. So, John, if you'll just come up after Blake, I won't come back up here. I'll just come up and thank you. But thank you, Blake.
Good morning, everyone. I love it being able to be here in person. This comes at a good time. Usually, a time when we're in transition between the holiday break and getting back into session. We were back at Tuesday, and we have a very busy, very important January to address. A lot of things that have been culminating. We need to get through them. We need to solve some of these issues, and hope to share a little bit about that today. But I have about 3.4 pages worth of written notes and written speech here. About for however much they equate 3.4 to 34 trillion in debt. Kind of is going to drive my conversation. But I'm not going to bore you with just constant debt. I know that's something that my staff is always like, Blake, enough with the debt already. Like, we know you're working on it, but it's a very depressing thing, like Senator Lee was talking about. But I want to substantively talk about it and share what we need to be doing, what we have tried to do, and what we need to be doing to solve what I view as our nation's biggest curse. We did a document in the Budget Committee this year called Reverse the Curse. It puts a 10-year balance. It It addresses the entirety of the issue that exists, and it's going to be tough to pass, right? It's easy to pass it out of a Republican-led majority in the Budget Committee, but getting it through the House even, and a very narrow majority and a narrowing majority right now until we get a few of these special elections back on board with us, and then getting it through the Senate would be nearly impossible in the current environment. But that is what our objective is. That is what our North Star is. And please know, if you learn nothing else from my conversation, that the House GOP is dedicated to this, and they're putting every ounce of their effort towards debt and immigration. Those are the two things we're trying to leverage in every single opportunity. And each thing that comes up, a leverage point that exists, we're trying to use H.R. 2 to do that. H.R. 1, we were able to leverage. H.R. 1 was energy. When the Republicans took over the majority, H.R. 1 and H.R. 2 were energy and immigration and border. So don't let anybody tell you that Republicans aren't focused on those two most important things in our nation right now. As President Biden's administration took over and completely obliterated those two things. Gas prices went through the roof, and border encounters went from like 2,000 to 3,000 to 12,000. The fixes on this are so available. I've heard Vice President Pence come and speak over the last couple years, and he sits there and he talks about the deal that was made from President Trump and his administration to make a simple policy change. So if we're seeking asylum, great. We welcome that. We're Americans. We've always been welcome to that. But you must remain in Mexico to do it, or you must remain in your third country. Make the request. We will go through the process, and that limits what the cartels can do. Because the cartels can't lie to their folks that are just trying to find a different solution for their family. You can't lie to them and say, hey, if I can get you to the border and you can get in, then you're going to get stuck in the system, you'll get a court date, and then all things spiral, and then eventually you'll be there. The Remain in Mexico policy, otherwise known as the Migrant Protection Protocols, completely debilitates what the cartels can do. And if President Biden, which is the part I just don't get, if President Biden would actually re-implement that, realize maybe that was a good policy. Maybe I shouldn't have used my executive order to reverse that. Maybe it was actually humane when 34 immigrants were suffocated in the back of a trailer. Right? You barely heard about this on the news. 34 immigrants. I believe it was 34. It's in the range of low 30s. Suffocated in the back of a trailer because we let the cartels control the border instead of our own policy. Now, I'm supportive of a border wall, and a border wall is secondary to a policy change. Policy types of change we're trying to make in H.R. 2. So we're trying to leverage H.R. 2 in every way possible. H.R. 1, we were able to get through the Fiscal Responsibility Act. We were able to get permitting reform. Not all of it, nowhere near all of it that we wanted, but we were able to get permitting reform and things like that we've been fighting for. So that is where our focus is. I wrote an op-ed in right before the 2022 election, and it's probably one of my favorite things that I've actually written and worked with my team on. I compared 2017 to 2021. And candidly, I think this is one of our major problems back in Washington right now, is we are in once-in-a-generation legislating. So when you have the White House, House, and Senate, when one party has that, then it's that moment to get things done. And then it's just gridlock and inability to work together and all that stuff when it's not the White House, House, and Senate, which we're in now. But when we had that trifecta, if you will, the ability to get things done, we were able to empower the American people. Look at the legislation that we did from Tax Cut and Jobs Act, right? That empowered the American worker. That empowered industry. That empowered American families. In 2021, when the Biden administration had the White House, House, and Senate, even though they were narrow margins, you're able to pass a bill bypassing the filibuster as long as it's related to budgetary issues. It's called budget reconciliation. And in 2021, they passed a $2 trillion bill with no offset spending, and 3 months later, we had the worst inflation we've seen in 40 years. So the American Rescue Plan, the American Rescue Act, was the single biggest driver of inflation that our nation has seen in 40 years. When we had 2017 and we did Tax Cut and Jobs Act, we had the strongest economic growth that our nation had seen in a long time, right? So it compared the two, empowering the American people or empower American bureaucracy. And that's the difference. That's the fundamental difference between the way a conservative thinks and a liberal thinks. And I encourage you to take a look at it. It's in the Washington Examiner. It's probably on our website somewhere. It's one of my favorite pieces that I've been able to do because it compares the way things are different. Okay? But here's the other issue. In 2017, we took the opportunity the best that we could to tackle what we felt like we could. I wasn't there at the time. I've talked to a lot of my colleagues. But we didn't tackle the biggest spending issues that we faced. We addressed one side of it, and that was getting a pro-growth tax policy. I'm 1,000% supportive of it. I now sit on the committee that deals with that, and I'm going to drive that forward. 2025 needs to be, everything we're looking for needs to be about, the tax policy is going to fundamentally change unless we win these elections in this coming cycle. But the last time that Republicans were substantively went after our biggest spending issues. And what are those? Those are what's found in our mandatory budget. Those are our programs: Social Security, Medicare, welfare programs, debt servicing. The last time we fundamentally went to go address that was the early 2000s. And George W. Bush had put together a plan with congressional Republicans to take a sincere look at Social Security and say, what can we do to help avoid 2008. So what was 2008? Oh, there was a financial recession at that point, but that's not what I'm talking about. 2008 would be a time in our nation where we had what was called it was going to be a demographic problem. There were good things though. One, our greatest generation, those that fought and served in World War II, they were living longer. That's an incredibly positive thing. With medical advancements, better education, and an understanding. We were living longer. That's a good thing. Our baby boomers in 2008 were set to start retire at a higher clip than they ever had before. So we had programs that were set up in 1930s, 35, and 65 with Medicare, programs that were set up for a different time that politicians were fundamentally unwilling to go and update, reform, and address. They were serving a group that existed before, and they weren't addressing what our biggest demographic was going to be. And all of a sudden, 2008 started happening, and the debt started piling on because we were having more beneficiaries to worker ratio. And that ratio has fundamentally led to the fastest rise in our nation's debt ever. So when I got to Washington, and I had said it all during my campaign, and I said I wanted to be focused on three major things. I want to be a part of reversing debt culture. I want to support our military and Hill Air Force Base, and I want to be an optimistic, conservative voice for the next generation. I feel like that's missing. And I can say today that after 3 years, 1.5 terms, I've gotten onto the committee that actually deals with our largest debt drivers, Ways and Means. I'm going to speak just briefly about that before I wrap up. Okay, I had steadfast support of our defense community and everything around Hill Air Force Base. Those of you that are in the 1st District, particularly Weber and Davis counties, I hope you're following along in the things that we're trying to do to make sure that we continue to have a strong process. Hill Air Force Base is the second largest, and I think the most important Air Force Base in our nation's defense. We serve, and our folks are serving across the world right now, and it's an absolute honor to be there. And when I ran for vice chair, and I didn't want there to be a spot open, because that meant we went through the speaker debacle and everything this year. But when there was a spot open for vice chair, when I ran, I went with one message. It's like, I want to win the future. I want to be that conservative voice that can help us win the future. And my colleagues, and the majority of them agreed. And they put me in that spot. Congratulations and condolences are welcome. But I decided I didn't want to run for a leadership spot. I felt like maybe it's a little early. We just went through a melee. This is not the right time to go after this. And my chief of staff, she was adamant. She says, you can do this. Like, this is the time to do it. And I thought to myself, if you're going to be in the game, you might as well be in the game. And so I went for it. And I want to use that leadership role to go and empower my colleagues to help us maintain our majority and grow it in this next election cycle. Okay, so Ways and Means Committee. We haven't had a Republican on Ways and Means Committee. I think there's been one for like one term a long, long time ago, and we've never had it. Senator Orrin Hatch worked on a lot of these issues, and when he retired, this was an area that we had Representative Curtis focusing heavily on making sure that we had sound defense spending in our discretionary budget, right? And that's about a quarter of our budget. Very important, not where our debt drivers are, and Representative Stewart had been heavily working on that. Representative Curtis, who's here, he and I work on 2 committees that deal with health care. And that is where our nation's biggest debt drivers are right now. And so it's an honor to be back there in this delegation. Burgess is focused on transportation. Celeste is working as she just got in there. We love this delegation, and we work and spread ourselves out as far as we possibly can to make sure that we're covering all the major issues. Ways and Means focuses entirely on our mandatory budget side. That is over 70% of our budget, and you won't see a single vote this year. I have a bill that has been developed with the Americans for Prosperity that would take our budgeting process and put the entirety of our budget into the game. Right now, 2/3 of our budget gets set aside and you never hear anything about it. And that is where the growth of the budget happens. And it's the biggest fundamental problem with our entire government right now is that we cannot even address that. We don't even vote on it. These are programs that were set up a long time ago. President Bush in early 2000s tried to create an opportunity for us to opt in, use our Social Security Trust Fund to embrace the mutual fund markets. In the early 2000s, the S&P was closing at $500 or $900. Today, the S&P is closing at $4,000. If we would have done what the conservatives in Congress early in the 2000s wanted to do, we would have been able to grow that trust fund to better service the needs of what an aging population is doing. Now we're in a tough spot. We have to create a real solution. I got onto the Ways and Means Healthcare Subcommittee, the Ways and Means Social Security Subcommittee, and the Ways and Means Welfare Subcommittee. Because I fundamentally believe that's where our biggest debt drivers are. Folks, this is not something I'm going to put on, I'm blasting on social media. This is not something that, unless you're following my newsletter, you probably won't know exactly all the work we're doing. I am back there entirely to solve those big problems. I encourage you to engage with our team however possible to know what we're doing to try to address these. There's real work going on. It's not the most popular. It's not the flashiest work that exists, but it is the only way we can address our true debt issues, and that's where I am. I'm all in with it. I've said it at many of these types of events. And this job's tough. I signed up for it, so nobody feel bad for me. The toughest part is missing kid stuff. I have 4 young kids, and it is also the only reason to do that type of work. I want to just share one last thing that is, I just can't understand how in the world this doesn't become so apparent to Americans, and because nobody will really talk and report on it. After Dobbs, I remember working with my team. My chief of staff is very close with the Susan B. Anthony list, and she's done a lot of work with them, and so we've been a lot of work together on this issue. And I remember I went and visited crisis pregnancy centers. I went and met with leaders in Utah and across the nation about this particular issue. The Biden administration's regulations will make it harder for women in need to access crisis pregnancy centers and abortion alternatives. Last year, Biden's Health and Human Services published a proposed rule that may exclude these life-saving pregnancy resource centers from being eligible for TANF funding. This funding is critical to organizations that are working with some of our most vulnerable women to support them when they choose life for their babies. It is wrong for the Biden administration to reduce access to these resources, promoting life and a healthy family unit. Sorry, I had to read that. In this whole world, crisis pregnancy centers are something that the Biden administration is taking away an opportunity to address, to truly try to move this in a direction that is fundamentally against supporting those in the most need. The Work and Welfare Committee on Ways and Means is working every angle we can to try to reverse this type of stuff. So I just want to thank you all. I'm going to be working tirelessly. Election season's coming up and everything. My focus now, as being in leadership in the House GOP, is to ensure that we not only maintain but grow our majority, and in doing so, we have to be able to communicate these types of things. It's hard because it's debt. It's all this not fun stuff to talk about. But House Republicans are focused on the most important things, and we're going to continue to do so. Thank you so much for your work that you're doing. Please engage with us however possible. And I now will turn over and let Representative Curtis take over, and he might have some slides.
Okay, I am delighted. I'm nervous. But I'm excited. I have something I want to share with you. And as I was driving up here, I thought about this. There's probably no group anywhere else in the world who will understand as well this concept of seeing something that worries you and not being able to get everybody in the world to join you. Does that make sense? And that's what I want to talk about today. Something I'm seeing. You've heard me talk about it. Go ahead and roll your eyes. I'm going to use the C word today, the climate word. But there's something I see that I need you to help me see and articulate. Does that make sense? So let's dive in. First of all, Gail, hello. Thank you for having me here. I am your representative. You're always quick to remind me of that. I'm delighted to be here with you. All right. So, I can't see the slides. There we go. All right. There's a lot of things out there that are big. Oh, thank you. All right. All right. Now I'm oriented. I can do this. Okay. Can anybody define for me the U.S. energy policy? Now I'm going to up the game a little bit. I brought with me a pair of limited edition collector series Curtis socks that I will give to anybody who can define for me the U.S. energy policy. Is that better? Oh, okay. So who can define, Phil, will you define the U.S. energy policy? I have a picture of it if it helps you. That's the next slide. Yeah, that is our energy policy. Phil needs a pair of Curtis socks. So this is the problem. The reality of it is the U.S. does not have an energy policy. We have a climate policy, right? Fair enough. And how many of you remember, I'm looking around the room, some of you remember the late 70s and 80s, when we learned as a country what it was like to be dependent on an adversary for fuel. It's a bad place to be. That's why this message impacts not just our economy, but also our national security. So if you want to know where we're headed with this climate policy, all you have to do is look at Europe. Now, interestingly, a couple of years ago, I was invited to Europe as a Republican. They wanted to show me what they were doing on climate. Can we just all enjoy the fun of that, a Republican being invited to Europe to see what they're doing on climate? We landed 2 days before the war broke out. We were there while the war broke out, and we were there 2 days after the war broke out. And what we learned is that a climate policy had made them dependent on an enemy for fuel, and that they couldn't heat their homes and they couldn't keep the lights on because they had followed a climate policy that took them in the wrong direction. And that's what I feel is the problem here in the United States, is we are on that exact same trajectory. Take a look at this slide. All those little red dots are nuclear plants that we have closed here in the United States. Nuclear energy was providing 20% of our energy. By the year 2030, it will provide 10% of our energy. In Europe, 20 years ago, the environmentalists said, nuclear is bad, shut it down. Belgium had 7 nuclear plants, so they shut them down. Today, it was at the time it was producing half of their energy. Today, that half of their energy has been replaced by Russian petroleum products. An enemy, right? They said that fracking was bad and that you shouldn't frack. Europe, just 15 years ago, produced as much natural gas as Russia. What happened? They decided they weren't going to frack. So today, they buy fracked natural gas from Russia. We're doing the exact same thing. We're shutting down drilling on federal land only to run to our enemies and ask them to produce more. President Biden has literally asked Russia and Venezuela to produce more energy while shutting down energy here on our public lands. And the hypocrisy of that is that fuel is far dirtier than our fuel here in the United States. All right, we're going to see if this meme is going to work. Oh, darn, it's not coming up. Okay, we're going to skip it. It was two cats fighting, and they had the labels of John Curtis and Joe Biden. And, oh, let's see. Yeah, maybe we can do it. Can you start there? I can't start the video from here. Can you start the video from there? Nope. Okay. All right. It was really funny. We're going to skip that. President Biden shut down the Keystone Pipeline, right? This is us mirroring Europe. And by the way, that Keystone Pipeline was going to run on 100% clean energy to bring that fuel in. And instead, we're trucking that in semi-trucks, that fuel here into the United States. And we pretend that this policy of shutting down the Keystone Pipeline is good for the environment. We waged a war on fossil fuels. You may remember President Biden in the State of the Union said, we will have fossil fuels for another 10 years. And everybody laughed because they know that we'll have fossil fuels with us for the rest of our lives. The use of fossil fuels has reduced more emissions than any other single program anywhere. Yet we've waged this war on fossil fuels. We're replacing dispatchable power with renewable power at an alarming rate. Can I share a quick story with you? I was in Scotland a couple of years ago, and the president of Scottish Power sat at my table. And he looked at me because he knew what I did, and he said, we're 100% renewable in Scotland. I said, that's fabulous. How did you do that? He said, wind. We have so much wind, we don't know what to do with all the wind that we have. And I looked at him and I asked the exact same question that all of you would have asked. What do you do when the wind doesn't blow? He said, that's easy. We import natural gas from Russia. Right? So it's this false sense. Look, Republicans don't hate renewables. We just know that they're only a slice of our overall energy policy. I was in Kenya. These pictures are of Kenya a few months ago. And I learned that the environmentalists shut down a hydroelectric dam, which would have provided clean energy with no emissions and water to the people in Kenya, because it's not environmentally friendly. The climate policy is putting the burden on those who can least afford to pay it. In Kenya, Meg Whitman was the ambassador, and she was talking to us and trying to recruit businesses to come into Kenya because she was saying they are 90% renewable. So if you're a business and you want to use renewable power, you should come here to Kenya. 10 minutes into her presentation, the lights went out. A few seconds later, the diesel generators kicked in, and the lights came back on, right? That's the problem with renewables. They're nice. We don't hate renewables, but you can't depend on them only. Okay, so here is the problem. We cannot course correct these bad policies if we're not at the table. And this is a symbolic picture of Republicans at the climate table. Right? We're not having any impact. This is what happened in Europe. Nobody, when they said it's time to shut down nuclear or to stop fracking, nobody was at that table saying the emperor has no clothes. That makes no sense. So why should Republicans talk about climate? You guys have heard me on this a lot. Why should we talk about climate? Well, like it or not, Republicans are the original environmentalist. Now, you may not like to be called an environmentalist, but let's think about it for a minute. How many of you like clean air and clean water? Do you remember the 1970s when Republicans set up the EPA for clean air and clean water? How many of you would like to leave the earth better than you found it. We all would, right? And so we deserve a place at this climate table. We deserve a seat to make sure that we're leaving this earth better than we found it. Why should Republicans talk climate? We don't want to lose in our ability or our influence on energy policy. Like it or not, the world is talking climate, and if we're not at the table changing and influencing these policies. What is our climate message? We care, and we care deeply about this earth, and we have better ideas. And there's a second thing that's just as important. This is a world problem, not just a US problem, right? So it doesn't do any good to shut down US businesses for regulations and let China open up a coal plant once a week. Okay, this is something, Climate Policy 101, if you don't remember anything else about what I said today, this is what I hope you'll take home. The best policy for national security, the best policy for affordable and reliable energy is also the best policy, hold your breath, for the environment. We should not be afraid of this conversation. Republicans know how to keep energy low, affordable, abundant, and clean. But we just don't talk about the clean part. We talk about the affordable part and the reliable part, but we don't talk about the clean part. This slide is critical because President Biden is going around the world telling people to produce more dirty energy. And do you know that the energy that we produce here in the United States, natural gas, is 40% cleaner than Russian natural gas? It's produced 40% cleaner. So think about that just for a minute. If we wanted to lower emissions around the world, all we would need to do is replace Russian natural gas with US natural gas. Imagine what that would do for our economy if we replaced all the Russian natural gas with US natural gas. Imagine what that would do for national security if they were buying it from us and not Russia. And guess what? It would reduce more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire Green New Deal combined. That one thing alone. And our coal, thank you. Yeah, I represent Carbon County. And I love to go back to Washington, D.C. and talk to environmentalists and say, you know, I represent a county called Carbon County. What do you think they do in Carbon County? Nuclear is a great Republican solution. Do you know that nuclear has 0 emissions? And we're not using it enough here in the United States. This is also very critical. The U.S. can lead in innovation into the new energy world. A reality is that the world is buying, this next slide says it really big, the market is driven to affordable, reliable, and clean energy. We can debate climate all day long. The world is going to buy reliable, affordable, and clean energy. Our decision point is, do we want to provide it to the rest of the world, or do we want to buy it from the rest of the world? And this is why Republicans need to engage. We know how, we know the recipe for affordable, reliable, clean. And the innovation that is going to come out of this, we want to come from the United States, not from China. And personally, I want it to come from Utah, then to the United States, and then to the rest of the world. Do you know that I have been to natural gas plants that emit 0 emissions based on US technology? Coal plants produce 0 emissions based on US technology. We're developing carbon sequestration and direct air capture at a rapid rate. And our coal industry and our fossil fuel industry tells us that in the year 2050, they will be net 0 on emissions. And this is another very important secret. The fossil fuel industry is not the problem to clean. They are the solution to clean. And this is what we have to be shouting from the housetops as Republicans. Well, listen, what am I doing about it? I am talking climate, and I know it drives some of you crazy. And I need you to talk climate because we have to be in this game, right? And I went back to Washington, D.C., and I said, look, colleagues, we've got to be talking climate. I formed a caucus. It's called the Conservative Climate Caucus. It's now the second largest caucus in all of Washington, D.C. of Republicans only talking climate because we want to lean into it. When asked in a town hall meeting if the climate's changing, you know what we want to say? Let me tell you what I'm doing about it. Let me tell you the Republican ideas. Let me tell you why U.S. needs to lead on this and why we need to be the innovative leaders on this very important topic. I put this slide up because when I was in Germany just a few weeks ago, a woman from Germany that was a delegate to this international conference on climate sent a letter around and got some U.S. senators to sign it that said that we should ban any expansion of U.S. natural gas. I was in a meeting with her, and she didn't know I knew about that letter, and she started telling me the story. She said, we were in trouble because we were buying our natural gas from Russia, but we switched and started to buy it from the United States, so we're very fortunate. So I raised my hand, I said, can you tell me why you want to prevent other people from doing just exactly what you did? And she got all flustered and she couldn't give me a good answer. But this is my point. If I wasn't in that room, this is a Fox News article where I had a chance to push back and tell the world that she was wrong in this. And this is my point. If we're not at that climate table, if we're not into these climate discussions, then we can't push back on this very important topic. So what can you do? I have an assignment for all of you. I want you to go home tonight, close the bathroom door and look in the mirror and say the word climate. And I promise you, you will be okay. Nothing bad will happen. And then the next thing I want you to do is I want you to find somebody who feels strongly that these policies of destroying our economy, making fuel unaffordable, making it unreliable, I want you to find somebody like that and start a conversation with them. And just experiment with some of these talking points of the fact that we can do it cleaner here in the United States, that our fossil fuels are cleaner. And see if we can start changing the dialogue out there that, A, we do care, and we care deeply about the earth, and we have better ideas. Ideas that keep prices affordable, reliable, keep us not just energy independent, but energy dominant. And guess what? They also reduce emissions. And let's face it, is less pollution better than more pollution? Sure. Is less plastic in the ocean better than more plastic in the ocean? Of course it is. And we want to reclaim that title of, we don't need to call ourselves environmentalists because I know you don't like that name, but we need to reclaim that title of we care and we care deeply. So thank you. It's a delight to be here with you today, and thanks for including me, and I hope the day is successful for all of you.
Thank you. Thank you to our two great congressmen to come today and have this great discussion with us. Now we're going to hear from a legislator, and he's going to talk about absolutely my favorite subject. So Phil Lyman will talk to us today about a bill that he will have this year before this legislature, and I might mention a few things about it later also. So Phil, yes, you're next. It's your turn.
Well, this will almost fit on. Thank you, Greg. And thank you, Gail. Jody and I, probably most in this room, have been praying for you, and we know you're going through some things with your kids, so our thoughts are with you, and thank you for all that you do. I've always said, if it weren't for Gail Ruzicka, the legislature would go completely off the rails, because she really does keep us honest. And what a great thing to be here. I see a lot of friends around the room, and it's an honor to be able to speak. They asked me what I wanted to make as my topic. I've got this bill that says that boys can't use girls' bathrooms, which is a pretty controversial bill. But when Whit asked me what I'd like to title my talk, I said, politics is downstream from culture. And that's really what we're dealing with here is when we talk about these issues. And we've got this cultural situation that's going on, and we're trying to, take care of it with policy, and our opponents, criticize us and say, oh, that's all you want to talk about is this silly, bathroom stuff. Well, it's actually not silly bathroom stuff. It's actually our culture, it's our children, it's our gender, it's those things that matter to us. But I want to tell a little bit of a story. 10 years ago, almost to the day, I had a town hall meeting in Blanding, and I had another one 2 nights ago, first one in 10 years. But I'll tell you why we had the town hall meeting. I had been to a meeting with Sally Jewell, who is the Secretary of Interior. If you recall, and I don't suspect that Senator Lee is listening, but this is a little bit of a story about Senator Lee because the government shut down in 2013 on October 1st, and on October 1st they shut down the Lake Powell, Arches, all the national parks, and I called up the governor's office and I said, we're going to go ahead and open up natural bridges. And we're going to go ahead and open up Lake Powell. We don't need the federal government to run it. They're private concession contracts. These aren't federal employees. We're going to open it up. And it caused a lot of stir. Jason Chaffetz was cheering me very silently from behind. And it went back to Washington, D.C. And I was on a conference call, and one of the people in the FBI said, we're not turning natural bridges over to a bunch of Boy Scouts. I went home and I called the scoutmaster, and I said, get the Boy Scouts ready. We're going down to natural bridges tomorrow, and we're opening up natural bridges. If you've been to natural bridges, it's a loop. You drive around it. It's like this does not require a lot of federal oversight, and those bridges have done pretty well for a really long time, without the stewards there watching them. So I said, we're going to open those up with the Boy Scouts, and we're going to do a fundraising thing at the same time, pay our SME. All of you who've been in Boy Scouts know what that's about. So Governor Herbert called and said, please don't do it. I'm getting $15 million of state money. We're going to pay the federal government so that they'll put these employees back to work, and we're going to get that opened. Just give us a couple of days. They did. Okay. A little while later, they got Lake Powell kind of open on a skeleton crew. But then I went to a meeting with Sally Jewell after that, and she started to criticize those people down there who dared to, threaten that they were going to open the parks themselves. And there was about 15 people around the table, and I was sitting next to her, but the introductions were going the other direction. So when it got to me, I looked at her and I said, Secretary Jewell, I said, I'm the county commissioner from San Juan County. I had 300 people at Lake Powell lose their jobs on October 1st who were expecting to work through the mid-November. That's where they get their money to finish out their mortgage payments for the year. It was really devastating. When I called down there to tell the guy, hey, we don't want this to happen, he was in tears, and I had to apologize and say, I'm sorry, I realize this is pretty traumatic. It was traumatic for a lot of people. I said, I'm a county commissioner. My job is to look out for the health, safety, and welfare of the people in my county. That's all I was trying to do. And she shook her finger at me and said, I know, and you cost us a lot of money. And I don't know if you have had the experience of having someone look you in the eyes and realizing that they have genuine contempt for you, almost hatred, I would say. And I thought, I'm a likable guy. I really am. Or at least I used to be. Back then, I was just a mild-mannered accountant, and it frightened me. It frightened me the level of contempt that she had. So we had a town hall meeting, and I said, we're going to get a national monument. It had been talked about for years. The narrative is going to be that everybody is okay with it, that we like it, unless we make some noise. So we made some noise. We did a protest at the town hall meeting. That wasn't the purpose of the meeting. I brought a book with me to the meeting. Some of you might recognize this, The Law, Frederick Bastiat, and we talked a little bit about that. We talked about what the Constitution means and what it means to be compliant or not compliant, and what you should do when there's unconstitutional things that happen. And our county had already been through a lot. When I was talking to those people I was talking to people who had experienced some real abuse at the hands of the Bureau of Land Management. Raided the community, some people lost their lives, families were destroyed, all for a narrative. And the narrative was, we've got to protect Native American artifacts. At the time, we're saying, this is not about artifacts. Everybody, this is not about artifacts. This is about natural resources. This is about uranium. This is about oil and gas. That's what San Juan County is. And and the more you tried to get that point across, the more they would say, oh, we knew you were racist, but now we know you're even twice as racist. And no matter what you said, you could not get the point across. And the people in the room knew that. And they said, we need to do an event, try to get the BLM's attention. We can't afford a lawsuit. We don't have millions of dollars. So we did the Recapture Canyon ride, which was a 100% legal ride. But it was. If you watch the January 6th stuff, again, it was hard to explain. Now I can say, well, if you saw what's going on with January 6th, you might understand what happened with Recapture, because it was very, very similar. But the point that I wanted to make was, people would say, you drove down a road? All this you did for a road? That's what this was about? How petty is that? And I at this meeting, I used Thomas Paine's quote, where he said, it's not a field of a few acres, but a cause that we're defending. And that's what the Revolutionary War was. It wasn't like, they weren't saying, hey, we want this land. This is our land. No, this is a cause. And it's the same thing that I'm running into with the bathroom bill. This isn't about a bathroom. This is about a cause. This is about our kids. This is about our culture, our society, our gender. Anyway, so as I was talking to those people, I knew that they knew what we were contending with, and same with this group. As I look around, I think I'm talking to people who know what we're contending with here. They know this is not about a bathroom. This is not about some trivial thing. The other day, I was on an interview with a woman who had called and asked, if we could talk about this, and she got to the end and she said, well, what do you say to the people that say you're trying to erase transgenders? I said, I'm not trying to erase transgenders. Transgenders are trying to erase gender. These are. And I told her, I said, there's two genders. Well, first I said, I hope you're asking that as a devil's advocate, not a real question. And she kind of joked, but I said, they're trying to erase gender. And this is a cultural thing that we have to defend. We have parents who are trying to teach their second graders, Johnny, you can be a good boy. You can be rambunctious. You can run and play and go to college. I was at hey Barbara, I was at my own college in Blanding, and one of the people who was giving us a report, she proudly said, we're at 72% female enrollment. And I was sitting next to an individual, and he says, oh, that's awesome. And I said, 3 to 1? You're 3 to 1 girls to boys? I said, is anybody going to the 5th grade boys and saying, hey, even you can go to college now? And I know we had a problem before where we're trying to correct that. That women were really not involved in those things. And so we try to correct that, but this is that's what you would call an overcorrection. And in policy, we try to do the right thing, not the reactive thing, not the knee-jerk thing. John Knox, if you followed any of his from the 1500s, his appeal to the Scottish principles, and he said governments should protect the innocent, and they should stand up against unjust edicts. And too often, left to itself, government does the opposite. They promote unjust edicts, and they attack the innocent. So who are the innocent? And I will get to this bill in just a second, but the bill's pretty straightforward. Who are the innocent? They're our children, obviously. We talk about sheep being innocent, and sheep don't really have the ability to defend themselves. Somebody's got to look after them. And a lot of times we're referred to as sheep, from a gospel standpoint. You are my sheep. And as I was driving up this morning, I was thinking about that statement. I thought, we're kind of like sheep, and I think that's what the scriptures really say. Like sheep, but not to be sheep. We're men and women. we have a difference. We can defend ourselves. And more importantly, we can stand up and defend other people. Daniel, in the Bible, when the edict was sent out that you will not pray, he didn't go hide in his closet and pray. He went in his room, he opened up his windows, and he prayed because he had to demonstrate to the people that I'm going to defy this king's law. And he knew what the consequences of that would be. And if he had not done that, if he had just said, well, you do what you want, I'm gonna sneak over here and say a prayer, hopefully nobody sees me. No, you have to stand up, you have to be counted. And I guess that's what the legislature, what I think with the legislature, they owe it to these kids to stand up for them. So yeah, it's not a political stunt. It's not like, hey, you just want some publicity for this. It's not that at all. And I hope it doesn't get lost. I want to say Kara Birkeland is running a similar bill. Hers deals more with women's spaces, and it's an excellent bill. And we'll be working together on this. But I like mine because it's basically saying there's boys and there's girls. So. So yeah, when people say, really? You're doing this over bathrooms? Is that all the Republicans want to talk about, is boys and girls bathrooms? Like, no, that's not the point. You want to diminish the bill by talking about it that way, and they're very, very good at it. But no, this is an important thing. So in the bill, and I think you've got them in your packet, and you can look through. This is dealing with LEAs, local education associations, and higher education currently, and basically goes down and says that it defines what a male is and what a female is, and what a changing facility is and what a bathroom is, and basically says if you're born a boy with the genitalia to produce sperm, then you're a male, and you have to use that bathroom or find a unisex bathroom, something that will accommodate that. You can't just go into the girls' bathroom. And if you do go into the girls' bathroom and nobody's there, it's not an offense. You haven't committed a sex crime. You're not a predator. But if someone is in there and says, "Hey, dude, you can't be in the girls' bathroom," then you either leave or you get charged with a trespass again. And with the LEAs and the higher education, it says that they will enforce this with some staff, with some backup, and penalties if they don't enforce it. Interestingly enough, in Utah right now, there is not a law that says that boys can't use girls' bathrooms. So you have some people brazenly that will go into a women's bathroom and stand there. Little girls coming and going, and the moms are saying, there's a man in the women's bathroom. He's like, well, try to do something about it. You can't kick me out. I'm here, and you can't kick me out. This isn't about creating a witch hunt mentality where people are looking to see if someone has masculine features or something else. This is about the state of Utah doing what I call passing a normative law, kind of like saying we drive on the right-hand side of the road. Yeah, if you're on your way to the hospital and somebody's on the right and you've swerving to the left, you're not breaking a law. Same thing here. But we have a law now, or hopefully we'll have a law at the end of this session that says that boys can't use the girls' restrooms or locker rooms, men can't use women's, and vice versa. So that is, in essence, that's what the bill does. Honestly, it is that simple. So if you want to read it, it's got a lot of detail, a lot of definitions that I think are going to be useful and controversial. But I guess in closing, what I would like to say is what an honor it is to be in a position of trust. And with that trust comes a duty. Whether you're a county commissioner or a state legislator, you have a duty to do that job that you agreed to do, that the people elected you to do. And it's not always easy, and it's not always popular. And I truly love the colleagues that I have in the legislature, some of the best people that you'll ever find. We disagree on some things on occasion, which is really, really healthy. But at the end of the day, we should be looking to our constituents and recognizing that in a Republican form of government, that is the source of the power. They are the bosses. Not the governor, not the leadership, the people that we're trying to serve. And I think if we keep that in mind, we'll pass better legislation. And I guess from the people standpoint, if you recognize that as well, then you can hold your elected officials accountable. And with that, I will say thank you and close up.
So your program says break. It was supposed to say stretch. No, it was supposed to not say anything. I was going to surprise you with the fact this break is just stand up, stretch. Please stay in the room because I guess, what do we call you now? Speaker. Yeah, Speaker Mike Schultz is here, and he is the next speaker, and you, literally, and you don't want to miss anything he has to say. So if you just take a stretch for a minute, and then we'll be right back. And only 5 minutes. We are starting in 5 minutes, right on time. Okay, everybody needs to sit down so we can get started. Please take your seats. So our next speaker, as I said, is our new Speaker of the House. And I asked him to come today because, you know, it's really interesting. I've watched this happen many times over the years with people that are the Speaker of the House. And because we that are up there, everybody knows the Speaker. All the legislators that know the Speaker, all the people that come up there, whether they're lobbyists or just come to whatever, know the Speaker. And maybe the people in the Speaker's district knows the Speaker. But the interesting thing is, outside of that little area on the Hill, people really don't know who the Speaker is. In fact, I've watched the Speakers of the House over the years have big ideas. They're going to move on, and they're going to go out and get elected to Congress or the Senate or become a governor or whatever, because they just assume everybody knows them, that they have name ID. And with the exception of Rob Bishop, there hasn't been a lot of success. So if you're going to visit, would you please go outside so that we want everybody to be able to hear our speaker today. So I thought, you know, we've got to start talking to people about who the Speaker of the House in the state of Utah, who that person is, because it's a very, very important position. So I asked him today to come here. So one, you can all meet him, and he's going to be making the rounds, I'm sure, to a lot of groups, so everybody can meet him. Maybe tell us a little about what it means to be Speaker. How important it is. Is it really important that we have a Speaker? I think it is. And, you know, what is the obligation of the Speaker? Who does the Speaker really represent when he's up there as Speaker? We know he represents his constituency, but who does he represent as Speaker? So, Speaker Schultz, would you come up and answer all those questions?
This isn't working. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a problem in our nation and even in our state, and it's a trust in government problem. And it's easy to see why we have that trust in government problem. Just look at the chaos that's going on back in Washington, D.C. Look at so many of our elected officials aren't listening to the people. They're listening to a lot of these special interest groups. We have a lack of bold leadership in the state and then in this, more importantly, in this country. I can't tell you how important it is to have a leader, to have leadership that is bold, that's willing to step out and get outside of the normal chaos that's going on. And let's focus on getting back to common sense solutions to our problems. I'm here today to commit to you that I will be a bold leader for the state of Utah and moving forward, and stand up and take the arrows and move this state forward and be part of helping move this state forward. Gail, I think that's one of the most important things for the Speaker of the House, to stand up and lead. He leads the largest body in state government. And I can't tell you how important that is. And I'm good. A lot of people don't do it because they're scared. Because they make decisions based out of fear. What are people going to say? What are the media going to say? I will not do that. I'm here to commit to you. I will not be that person. When I was a teenager, I got drug around an arena on a buck and bull 3 or 4 times, stepped on and kicked on, and black and blue, dislocated joints. When I was done, I laid in bed for a week to 2 weeks and couldn't walk because I was too sore. Nothing they can throw at me will hurt that bad, so I'm fine. Let's talk a little bit about our federal government and federalism and what that means. We've spent, in our federal lands, we've spent years talking about our federal lands. Ken, how long have we been talking about taking our federal lands back in this state? We're done talking. And why is this so important? Utah has become the political ATM for the Democrat Party. They create these monuments to give back to their special interest groups and to the environmentalists on the backs of Utah citizens and our land. We're done. How important is this? We have the most restrictive management plan coming at us in the next few months on Bears Ears. It is designed to keep you out of Bears Ears, the citizens of this state, people across the country, out of Bears Ears. It's wrong, and we're going to stand up, and we're not going to allow that to happen. We're going to fight. Every other week, it seems like I'm getting pulled into a meeting. Every other week, getting pulled into a meeting about a new federal rule coming at us. The last one, we just got a letter from the EPA. We all know that Utah's out of attainment, right? I mean, on our air quality. Well, I got a slide here on this. Even though our air quality today is better than it was in the 1970s, in many cases better than it was in the 1890s, we're still we still don't meet attainment and the rules forced on us by the EPA. Do you know why? Because their standards that they set are impossible for us to meet. We could take every form of human existence out of this valley that we live in, every form of human existence out of this valley, and we would not meet the standard set on us by the EPA. When I heard that, I said, come again? I was talking to DAQ. I said, come again? Tell me that again. Let me understand. I asked the question 3 different ways, 3 different times to make sure I understood that. That is the rule that's being forced on us. We can't even meet it. They sent us a letter saying that if we don't make some changes to come within compliance, that we will lose our federal funds for roads. Okay, well, that's not great. It's our gas money, 18 cents for every gallon we send back to the federal government. They put those types of restrictions on it and then send it back to us. Thank you. Maybe we lose it, okay, maybe we don't, but let's just say we say, okay, fine. We'll walk away from it. What happens next? Let me just tell you, what happens next? They take it the step further. In that letter, it says, if you still don't come with compliance, we're going to put a rule in place that says you can't expand one more road in the state of Utah. You can't build another road in the state of Utah. These things that are coming at us are so ridiculous. We're done. We're going to take a stand. We're going to push back. It's time to tell Utah is fighting back. Energy. This blows my mind. We're expected to double our energy uses across this nation, double our energy over the next 20 years. And what are they doing? Doing everything they can to shut down energy development and clean and dispatchable energy. We have to have it. Solar farms don't cut it because you can't store the energy to when we need it the most, and that's in the evenings. The sun's not shining, right? We produce more electricity in the middle of the day right now than we need. We'd have to have our reliable, dispatchable energy. Well, recently, who's familiar with the OTR rule that came at us? The ozone transfer rule came at us a couple of years ago from the state, maybe a year ago from the state. It sets out to close Utah's coal-fired power plants. Okay, maybe that's a good idea. I don't think so. I think it's a terrible idea. But you have to ask, well, then what? Let's just say you close the coal-fired power plants. And by the way, the coal we burn here in Utah in our power plants are the cleanest in the world, okay? The cleanest in the world. And they're still coming at us. Say, okay, well, maybe let's look at transitioning to gas, natural gas. Well, guess what? We can't transition our power plants to gas because we can't get the pipelines across the federal lands to get the gas to the power plants. That doesn't work. Say, okay, let's talk about nuclear. 20 years to permit a nuclear power plant in the state of Utah. How is this even possible? Where is the common sense? In 9 years, they're trying to shut every coal-fired power plant down, including in Utah. We're done. We filed a lawsuit on it. We've won the first round, right? We've won the first round. The first round was, and Kentucky missed this. They did this to Kentucky. Kentucky didn't get ahead of it soon enough. And by the time Kentucky won the lawsuit, it was too late because they already put the reforms in place. We didn't do that. We filed the lawsuit early. We got the stay. We could continue operating as is. They can't enforce those rules. What else are we doing? Utah Power, or Rocky Mountain Power, is currently consisted of 6 states. California, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Wyoming, and Utah. Guess what? We want a divorce from 3 of those states. California, Washington, and Oregon. We're done. We've been working with Rocky Mountain Power to figure out what this looks like. We have a plan. We're working on it because we're done letting California, Washington, and Oregon dictate to Utah what the policies and standards are. And whether we team up with Wyoming or Idaho, we don't know yet, but we're certainly open to that if that's beneficial to the citizens of the state. If not, we'll go at it alone, okay? And let me tell you what we're doing. We're going to take that power that they're giving up. They're walking away from it. We're going to take it, and we're going to hold on to it for the citizens of the state, for our future growth. And in the meantime, while we don't need all that power because roughly about 60% of the power is going to other areas, but we're going to hold on to that power. And when they realize that they don't have any other solutions, we're going to turn them back to them, and we'll have the ability to sell it to them at 3 times the cost, okay? And you know what that's going to do for you? It's going to drop your rates because they're going to offset it, okay? So Utah already has the 3rd lowest rates in the nation. 3rd lowest rates in the nation. We're going for number 1, lowest utility rates, okay? But we're done letting those other states decide the future for Utah. We are preparing to file more lawsuits than ever before at the federal government. Okay? We are hiring more attorneys. We're setting more money aside. It's time that we push back and protect our state sovereignty, and we're committed to doing this. And now, here's my favorite bill of the session. We are working with the Senate and the House together. It's just got released the other day, SB 57. SB 57, Utah Constitutional Sovereignty Act. What does it do? When we get these unreasonable, ridiculous, unconstitutional rules put at us, not by the elected officials in Congress, by the way, mind you, by the bureaucrats, okay? And we're going to work together with the Senate, President, the Speaker, our body, and our attorneys and determine if that rule is constitutional. If we think that rule is unconstitutional, then we're going to convene the legislature, we're going to take a vote on it, and we're going to tell our state agencies that they can't enforce that federal rule. It's time to let them sue us, okay? It's time to let them sue us. We're done going forward. And it's time for us to say enough. The 10th Amendment means something. So what else? Higher ed reforms. Who thinks we need higher ed reforms in this state? I could talk the whole day on higher ed reforms, right? I mean, it's unbelievable. But so I'm not going to get into the details, but just know we are working, and we are going to continue to work on taking care of our higher eds, and with the goal, it's simple. It's not that hard, really. Let's just get the focus back to educating our kids. Let's just getting the focus back to educating our kids. And I'm serious about this. It's one of my top priorities over the next several years. And it's going to be a multi-front approach. And if you don't think I'm serious about it, look up my statement that I sent out a couple weeks ago. We're moving. We're serious about it. And since I put that statement out, you wouldn't believe all the phone calls I've gotten from university professors saying, thank you for standing up. You wouldn't believe what's going on inside our universities. And so it's time that we create an atmosphere inside our universities that we attract normal university professors to the state of Utah, right? That's our goal. Let's have the rest of the nation that has those universities, normal professors in those universities that feel isolated, to feel Utah as a safe place. That's what we're focused on. Ladies and gentlemen, just as I conclude, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here. Gail and Delane, thank you for the ability to come. I have been starting to get out more over the last month or two as I've become speaker, and I'm going to continue to do that. I commit to coming out and talking to the groups, talking with citizens to the best that I can. It's a busy job, but I'm 100% committed to this. I've given everything else up in my life except for my family. They're number one. They will always be number one. But outside of that, I'm committed to the state of Utah. I'm here because I absolutely love the state of Utah. I love that it's given me the ability to grow up and go out and live the American dream. I want that for my kids. I want it for your kids. We are in the fight of our life right now. We're losing it. It's time that we get back to our common sense principles. It's not that hard. It really isn't. We're going to do it. We're going to stand up. The 10th Amendment means something, and I want to fight to earn your trust, and I want you to hold me accountable to the things that I say, that I do, that I'm going to do. And I'll work. I'm not going to be 100% perfect, okay? I'm not. And we're not going to agree on everything either. Ronald Reagan's my favorite president of all times. He said that, you know what, we're not going to agree on everything, but if we agree on 80% of the things, I consider you a friend. Let's work together to find the solutions that we can, find win-win solutions to come together and fight and take our country back and lead the nation on these things. I'm committed to that. Hold me accountable. We're going to go, and we're going to fight. The 10th Amendment means something. Thank you again for allowing me to be here.
So, is the congressman here? Congressman Owens, is he here? Not yet. Chris, are you ready? Well, because we just heard from Celeste Malloy, and there was a transportation problem for her, so she's running a little late. If Burgess isn't here yet, guess who's next? So, Chris Ullman is the national president of Eagle Forum, and we are so privileged to have her with us today and for all of you to meet her and find out what we're all about. You know, our national president was Phyllis Schlafly. She started Eagle Forum. She's the founder of Eagle Forum, and we had her with us for years and years as our president. People used to ask me, you know, what are you going to do when Phyllis is gone? And I was just like, what do you mean when Phyllis is gone? She's not going anyplace, you know. And she almost didn't. in spite of everything that happened to her, excuse me, she lived into her 90s, and she was, in fact, just before she passed, she was at the National Republican Convention, and she was telling people what to do. And so I just figured she'd be telling us all what to do forever and ever. She probably is. I mean, surely she's probably up there. But here is Chris, who is now in that position. Chris worked for Phyllis. I met Chris when she hadn't been out of law school very long. And she was with Eagle Forum. She's the executive director. She's with Eagle Forum for years. But as all good Eagles tend to do, leaders that Phyllis would hire, after doing a few other things, she got married, had a family, and stayed home and raised her children. And she's reared wonderful children. And now she is back as the president, and we are just grateful to have her here today.
Well, in good Phyllis fashion, I'm going to set my timer here because I can get carried away and forget how long I'm speaking. And Phyllis wouldn't have liked that. So yeah, Gail was right. The last time I was here was when I was executive director of Eagle Forum back in the late 90s. And it was my one and only other time coming to Utah. But I've always loved Utah. And when Gail said, would you like to come back? I said, yes. Unfortunately, I didn't leave myself enough time to ski, but that's okay. Yeah, I know. There's not a lot of snow. I kind of like that. I kind of like global warming because I don't like cold weather. But every time it's hot, I'm like, oh, thank you, global warming. But that's because I'm a Southern girl. Just recently, for those of you, and I know some of you came out to DC in September for our conference, and our chairman, Ann Schlafly, spoke about a new bumper sticker that she wanted to create, and then I said to her, you have to create it, and it says, question the authorities. And everyone's heard of the question authority, the great phrase from that wonderful cultural leader Timothy Leary back in the 1960s, who believed in the powers of LSD and taught young people to question authority. But at Eagle Forum, we believe that we need to question the authorities. And just listening to the speakers this morning, so many of them talked about that. Authority goes unquestioned too often in our life. Perhaps some of you are familiar with a study back in the 1960s by a Yale University psychologist named Stanley Milgram. And he did an experiment to see how far people would go if instructed by people in authority. So he selected several participants, and they were oblivious, to play the role of a teacher and instructed them to administer an increasingly significant electrical shock on students who got a question wrong. He asked the teacher was supposed to ask the student a question, and if the student got it wrong, they were supposed to administer an electrical shock. The students were in on it, and the researcher was in on it, but the teacher was not. And so the students would howl in pain, and they would answer the questions wrong and howl in pain. And the teacher, the actual subject, would look at the authority, the researcher, and they would say, no, more, administer more, every time somebody got the question wrong. And so he did this to see how far people would go, and he found out that 65% of the participants administered the maximum shock to the student, listening to them scream in pain, what they thought was pain, ignoring their own morals. They did not stop to question the people in authority. And we really need to stop and question the people in authority. Benjamin Franklin was quoted as saying, "It is the first responsibility of every citizen to question authority." And that's probably where Timothy Leary got his phrase. But as we look around at the events in our world today and the circumstances, we really need to consult our faith and question those in authority before we comply with rules, regulations, laws, and ordinances. We need to know who exactly is claiming to be in authority over us. And those of us, all of us in this room who are constitutional conservatives, know that the authority for our government comes from our Constitution. It does not come from any other place. Too often we see today that people are, especially the Biden administration, Constitution, what is it? First of all, he talks all about we need to protect democracy. Democracy. Does he not know we live in a constitutional republic? We don't live in a democracy. What's he talking about? First and foremost. And then they just throw the Constitution out the window. We look at the Senator Tommy Tuberville, who stood up against the abortion funding when the Secretary of Defense wrote a memo, and where in the Constitution does it say we're governed by memos? Wrote a memo that said the federal government will fund abortion travel up to 21 days of paid leave for military members to either get abortions or travel with their family, in contradiction to federal law. But he wrote a memo, and that's the authority that we're all supposed to follow. I'm sorry, we're not going to do it. We're not going to follow authorities that are not actually authority. So let me give you a few other examples of what we mean when we say question the authorities. Let's look back at COVID. There were so many authorities in COVID. It's probably the easiest example of blind trust of those who claimed to be an authority over us. You know, prior to COVID, a lot of us had some trust in public health. I know I did pretty much when the first of my 3 children were born. When I was in law school, my law school roommate went on to work for the Vaccine Injury Compensation Fund and that court. And so I knew all about the vaccine liability and how the government agreed to pay if your child is injured. And so I was very skeptical. I said to the doctor, I want to wait until my kids are 6 months old before I start getting them vaccinated. Is that okay? Once they're 6 months old, because that 3 to 4 months is the time when most injuries happen. And they say that's the time in baby's development when seizure disorders and stuff are supposed to come out. So you don't know if it's the vaccine. You don't know if it's just a natural disorder. So I said, I'm just going to wait till after that. And she said, sure. The reason we start vaccinating so early is because a lot of people fall through the cracks and they never come back. But as long as you commit to bringing your kids back and you're educated, and I know you will, yes, you can delay your vaccines for your kids. And that's when I start to think, you know, this public health thing, there's another agenda here. But recently, it was back in July that Francis Collins gave a speech to the Better Angels group, but just recently it came out what he said. And what he said was, if you're a public health person and you're trying to make a decision, you have this very narrow view of what is right. So you attach infinite value to stopping the disease and saving a life. You attach zero value to whether this actually totally disrupts people's lives, ruins the economy, and has many kids kept out of school in a way that they never quite recover from. So here he is, years later, admitting that the public health officials the authorities didn't balance the pros and cons of the different approach. They had infinite value on one factor and zero value on everything else. Now, National Review's Rich Lowry summarized it this way. The public health officials are getting around to admitting the fallibility of public health officials. This is welcome if belated. Yes, I agree. We are grateful that at least Francis Collins now is admitting the fallibility of his authority. But this is just another example of how we have to question, who are we putting in authority? Do they have the authority, and why are we following what they say? Another example, the whole transgender issue, and Representative Lyman mentioned this. What is a woman? I know Everyone in this room can answer that question. But there are too many people in authority who can't actually answer the question. And yes, I'm talking to you, Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. It's not that hard of a question. And of course, our Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services, Admiral Rachel Levine, the first openly transgendered official to be confirmed by the Senate, as well as the highest ranking openly transgender official in U.S. history. And that's how she's billed according to womenshistory.org. She is the authority, or I don't even want to use she. This person is held up as the authority that it speaks for our federal government on what it means to be a woman, what sex means, and what gender means. This authority, Admiral Levine said, tweeted out, accredited medical professional groups agree that gender-affirming care is medically necessary, safe, and effective for trans and non-binary youth. Now, this is an appeal to authority. It's a logical fallacy. Admiral Levine is claiming that there's consensus on this issue when we know that there's not. Admiral Levine also said there is sex. You might think that's simple, but it's not. There's chromosomal sex, and there are primary sex characteristics, secondary sexual characteristics, and so it is multidimensional. Then there's gender. Gender is really that self-concept in terms of your gender that is also multidimensional. Authority Levine also said that gender-affirming care has support at the highest levels of our federal government, and that the practice of medically changing a child's gender will eventually become normalized. Now, I'm sorry, but that's an authority that I'm going to question, and I am not going to follow, and I encourage all of you to do the same. And remember, while Admiral Levine was confirmed by the United States Senate, not as a lawmaker, not as someone who has the ability to change the laws of this country. So we see that our elected officials aren't the ones making the decisions. It's these unelected bureaucrats that are changing our laws and affecting our lives, and that is why we need to stand up and question them. Now, I want to talk briefly about another issue of authority that is one of Eagle Forum's primary focuses for this year. Now, we are obviously involved in protecting our children from the transgender agenda, on pro-life issues, on parents' rights, and all that stuff. But sometimes, as I learned back in the 1990s when I started working for Phyllis, and the first issue she gave me to work on was the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. And I said, I just agreed to work for a pro-family organization, and I'm working on a world trade issue that I don't know anything about. And she said, everything, Chris, is a pro-family issue. And it's true, everything is a pro-family issue. And that's why we're really focusing on the World Health Organization and what they're trying to do, not just to take the US sovereignty, but to take, I would say, our individual freedoms as well. And so the World Health Organization, who was pivotal in the whole COVID response, is now trying to do some really, really dangerous things. There's two things that they're trying to do: rewrite the international health regulations, as well as put in a new pandemic preparedness treaty. And it was really interesting. I've been speaking on this for a while, and last night I got into my hotel room, and Tucker Carlson has just done an interview with Brett Weinstein. It's like over an hour long. I think I listened to it twice last night. And Brett Weinstein is like right on it. He totally gets this whole thing about what's wrong with the WHO, who they are, and what they're trying to do. So, as you might know, the WHO is part of the UN, and it was founded in the 1940s, and it was supposed to be this, the world would come together and focus on kind of public health, what we can do to maximize health around the world, and they focused that every country is going to be independent, each person would be equal, and that human agency and autonomy are key to good society. And all that is very feel-good, empty rhetoric, and not a lot of room for the elites to be in charge. So they found a way to come in and to dictate who's going to make the decisions, who's going to be in authority, and what we're going to do. One of the ways that started was when private philanthropy started to get involved in the WHO. And this is, we're not in favor of these international busybody organizations in general, but especially when the union between public and private, the union between our elected officials and the private sector come in and kind of have this unholy alliance. So in the year 2000, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was founded, and they became the major direct funder of the WHO, resulting in this new era of public-private partnership. Of all the private funders to the WHO, and there are many, Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation is responsible for 88% of the private philanthropy that goes into the WHO. And as we know, he who pays the piper calls the tune. In the year 2018 to 2019, the WHO budget, the biggest donor to the WHO was the United States government at $893 million, and the Gates Foundation was number 2 at $531 million. So that just shows you how much influence they have. And we saw what they did during COVID, how they suggested lockdowns, all these things that were actually against their very own recommendations that had been in place for decades. Border closures, quarantines, restrictions on healthy people. Those were things that the WHO said should never be done during a pandemic. And yet they did it during the COVID pandemic. So just talking a little bit about the international health regulations, and what they want to do. The international health regulations have been around for a while. They were last amended in 2005, but now they're trying to amend them again in the post-COVID era. And some of the things that they want to do is to expand the definition of pandemic and health emergencies for not just an actual emergency, for anything that is a potential for harm. They want to change the recommendations from non-binding to mandatory. Again, that changes the whole nature of these health regulations that we signed on to back in the 1940s. And it also gives the Director General the ability to independently declare emergencies at any time for any potential risk to public health. What could some of those risks to public health be? Climate change, gun violence, you name it, anything. And they're also trying to bring in this One Health where we focus not on human health, but we put human health, plant health, and environmental health all on the same level. So the One Health is an approach that gives each one of those the same amount of weight. So we're very opposed to these international health regulations. And one of the key things that these do, as well as the amendments or the new pandemic treaty, is they fight mis, dis, and malinformation. This, of course, stops our ability to question the authorities. They cannot have it in a way that we're able to question what they're doing. Again, the preparedness treaty, the pandemic preparedness treaty, does the same thing. In Article 18, it says, the parties shall combat the infodemic and tackle false, misleading misinformation or disinformation. And an infodemic means, and this is their words, too much information, including false or misleading information in digital or physical environments during a disease outbreak. It causes confusion and risk-taking behaviors that can harm health. It also leads to mistrust in health authorities and undermines the public health response. Well, they're right about that. It certainly does cause mistrust in the health authorities, and we have to be committed to questioning them and to stopping any attempt at our ability to speak out and to educate people. Brett Weinstein in this Tucker Carlson interview said, malinformation is when you don't repeat the official line. That is the definition of malinformation. So there you have it. The WHO's plan only works if we're forbidden to question the authorities. And if that wasn't enough, and you think, oh, the WHO, will they ever stop? Well, just earlier in December, they decided they're going to write new guidelines, international guidelines, regarding the health of trans and gender diverse people. They have just released on December 18th their list of their 21 experts, their 21 authorities that are going to be on the panel of the people who are going to write these health guidelines. 3/4 of them have ties to WPATH. That's the trans lobby that writes the health standards, or other trans aligned groups. And when I read that, someone sent it to me, and I said, yeah, you know, I better just do some double checking. So I took all 21 names and I did my own research, and it is true that they are aligned with WPATH. So let me just say that one of the things that you can do to help out is Senator Lee has a bill to get us out of the UN, which includes getting us out of the WHO. And the House of Representatives has zeroed out the WHO in the State Department funding bill. That bill has not been signed into law yet. It's still going through the process. We need to demand from the House and the Senate that they keep that zero in on the State Department bill, so there's no money that goes to the WHO for this year. And as my time runs out, there's a lot of reasons why we don't question the authorities. We might feel like, why bother? What difference can I do? We might be afraid of the consequence that comes when we do step out. The loss of friends, the loss of family, or even worse. But not questioning will ultimately have adverse consequences. It creates that top-down authoritative approach. It leaves us where we are and not a very good place. But we can speak out. We can question the authorities. You can join Eagle Forum National. You can work with Gail and the others here in Utah. We can question the authorities. Be courageous. Stand up for the truth. We know that our authority when it comes to government comes from the Constitution, and our authority in our moral lives comes from God. And those are the authorities that we need to trust. And anyone else claiming to have some right to tell us what to do must be questioned and must be called out. Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm sure Phyllis is watching. She had to love that. So the congressman is here now. Let's see. Where is he? I see him. You want to come up? We are just so grateful. Burgess is always so willing to be here. Always comes and gives us a great speech. And so after we hear from Burgess, I don't know that Celeste is here, so I'll probably come up and introduce her too. So thank you for being with us today, and thank you for sharing that message. Thank you so much.
Let me just, start off by saying whenever I see the invitation from Eagle Forum, it kind of brings a smile to my face. I know I'll be seeing Gail. And I want to thank Chris. Really, I want to thank everyone here I like to start off my talks nowadays expressing how much I appreciate being a Utahn, because what we're hearing here, the education you guys are getting, is not everywhere. We don't have across our country this type of engagement, this type of understanding that. Get some water, somebody. Great, thank you so much. We kind of have a culture. First of all, I appreciate it because it's what I grew up in. I grew up in a culture, deep South. We talk some very simple principles that really allows you to not only be excited about your future, to know that we're here to serve, to leave a legacy. And it comes down to understanding faith, family, free market, and education. It's really that simple. And we kind of take it for granted here in Utah because we do it. That's who we are. We're the ones that send our kids out to serve, to take that risk, to understand what it is to feel uncomfortable, but to make it through that process and become better by the process. So we kind of take for granted that is just the way it is out there, but it's not. So just know that you guys are the tip of the spear for freedom. You're the tip of the spear for innovation, for the things our country needs to understand and come back to. As we grow our great state, we're the ones that can show the rest of the country how to do it right, how to put an infrastructure in place, how to make sure business owners can thrive and grow, how to be a destination, and how to make sure that we have an environment that our kids want to stay here. And if they do go out to college someplace, they want to come back. I'm really blessed. It's a miracle when I look at it, because never, as I was raising my 6 kids, did we ever think that Utah would be our final home. But all 6 kids are here, 17 grandkids. So we're all in. My goal is to make sure that from this point on, the Owens name will be one that is known, tied to Utah. So I just want to start off by saying thank you guys. You're doing things that I think you kind of take for granted, but I don't want you to do that. I'm going to do a couple things. And then Gail, thank you so much. I really do I appreciate seeing you and it's having those strong conservative voices and messages that comes out of these gatherings. I want to do a couple things. Highlight what it is that we're here to get done, to kind of tie it into a little bit of the year I went to the Super Bowl and the year after the Super Bowl, and to help us understand that we as a people have to be smart, strategic, bold, courageous, and all in. The theme and culture of the Raiders, very simply, was just win, baby. It didn't matter if it was pretty, it didn't matter if it was won by 1 point. At the end of the day, the record was win, and that's what they were all about. Now, we have had a majority for the last it's 11 months, 10 months, whatever it might be. And there's a difference. I had a chance to experience it as in a minority and a majority. And there's a difference. When you're in a minority, you're not going to win most of the time. But you can still give a message. You can still message your base that you're listening, you're trying. It's like you can always throw Hail Marys every single play and everybody's still excited because at least you're trying, right? When you're in the winning column, when you have the team that can make sure you move forward, it's not about Hail Marys. It's about being smart, strategic. 1 play, 1 yard at a time, 5 yards at a time, maybe a draw. You're doing things to make sure that you're getting closer and closer to the end zone and scoring points. We have been winning this year, and I'm going to highlight that by a couple things we've done that you might not know about. Because sometimes freedom is something that to win it is exciting, to keep it sometimes it's boring. And that's why we can sometimes check out. We live in this freedom bubble. And we take for granted freedom is just going to be something we wake up to every single day. So to build our dreams, our memories, our kids, our businesses, we just live in this little freedom bubble, not realizing there's evil on the outside of that bubble that's going after us every single day. So it might be boring, but it's so important. And it's now important for us to be as engaged as possible to make sure we keep it. So I'm going to list a couple things that's happened. When you hear somebody says we didn't do anything the last 9 months, It's because they're not paying attention. Because in terms of bills, maybe we didn't pass as many bills as the Democrats did, but we're now dealing with what the Democrats did, right? So the number of bills is not the key. It's the message, it's the concept of giving power back to the people. It's the fact of basing everything we do on freedom. If we do that, then we're starting to do okay. Let me just list a couple things. Ended the COVID-19 emergency vaccine mandate. Collected a bipartisan select committee on China. 2 select committees on weaponization of federal government and the origins of COVID. Passed the Lowering Energy Costs Act that gets us back to unleashing American energy to independence. Have started an impeachment inquiry, which we're gonna kick off into as we get into this coming year. Not only Marcus, but Biden. Can I say something, guys? Smart, strategic. Now, many of us understand that Biden is a mess. I would say he's a traitor, and I think that word needs to be talked about a little bit more. But let's also be honest. Everybody in this country has not been exposed to what you have. So we have to be smart to recognize if you go too fast without educating American people, there's going to be rebellion by those who don't understand what you understand. So the fact that we had to take our time to get this inquiry, and all the inquiry meant was that we can now force the administration to give us stuff that in the past they would not give us. So this is the strategic part of this. And for some folks are very frustrated we just didn't come out of the box and do this. If we had done that, we would have lost the opportunity and the will of the American people to be with us. So just understand this is a strategic piece of it. Parents' Bill of Rights. It's sad to say that we have to even put together a Parents' Bill of Rights. We kind of took that for granted, didn't we, growing up? That it's the parents' kids. The kids belong to the parents, not to the government. Well, we have to put that in place now, and still, with that being said, it didn't go through the Senate. Halting the Fentanyl Act. Stopping the 87,000 IRS agents that Biden wanted to put in place. Just a few weeks ago, I put on the floor a bill called the One Door Act. Utah is so unique in terms of how we collaborate. In terms of workforce, tying in a place where people can not only find a job, but get the social services they need to get back on their feet, food, housing, all in one location. It seems like that would be kind of common sense, but we're the one that grandfathered in. We're the only state in the union that's grandfathered in. You can go to one place and get all this support. I just happened to visit there yesterday, and to see it firsthand is exciting, because now it's a talk of our conference. Because states now can, just because it's One Door Act, states can now do the exact same thing we've been doing for years. They can finally be allowed to either look at what we're doing, to innovate on it, or to do exactly what we did with it. We, by the way, are the first conference that came out with the 3 priorities: China, the budget, and education. And I'm excited about being part of a conference that's finally saying that education is at the foundation of what we do. It was Thomas Jefferson said, ignorant and free can never be. And I tell you, there's a reason why our founders were granted such wisdom to create this remarkable Constitution that's survived those last 200 years. Heavenly Father put it in place so we can go through all the gyrations of life and gyrations of coming and flowing of liberty to get to a point where we, the people, can decide the direction we go in, as long as we're educated, as long as we can talk to each other. What the left does, and they're very effective with it, is to try to divide us. They segregate us every chance they get. Part of the process of bringing all these folks into our country so fast is impossible to assimilate. It's impossible for them to learn the language, to know what our culture's about, to recognize that we look at each other inside out, not outside in. And because we do that, we have we have a propensity to want to unite, coming together. That's who we are as a nation. What the other side wants to do is divide us. And what's happening right now at the border, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Part of that is make sure we have so much divisiveness going on between that and our colleges that we can never do what we the people do best. Find those things in common and make sure we're fighting for freedom. There's something back in the 1960s called the Cloward-Piven strategy. Many of you guys don't know what that means or what that is. I'm going to tell you, we've seen it. The Cloward-Piven strategy was a couple Marxists. They called them socialists in those days in the 60s. And their goal, very simply, was to overwhelm the welfare system. And they used black community to do so. They promoted, they educated, they pushed black Americans to go toward welfare as an entitlement. Coming out of a community that looked at victimization as a curse word, this took effort. This took effort. But I'll tell you what happens when you overwhelm anything. There's 4 phases of the Cloward-Piven strategy. Think about COVID. Think about what's at the border. You overwhelm a system. You create chaos. And out of desperation, you then take control. And after taking control, you then implement your Marxist, communist, socialist ways. COVID is such a great, isn't it? Think about COVID. We look back now and why we are all kind of at this position where we're now wanting to get educated. We woke up one day, coming out of a little freedom bubble, and realize, wait a minute, I can't go to church, I can't open my business, I can't put my kids in school. These are things we took for granted. It's like breathing air. I don't feel safe anymore. That's called chaos. And from that chaos, think about what they did to almost destroy our system, our society. How many businesses will never recover? How many of these urban cities will never, ever come back? Because we now have kids that actually are growing up thinking they're entitled to take stuff, as long as it's under $1,000. Think about within a couple years, what's happened to the mentality of honesty, of keeping your word, being committed to something else other than yourself. Within a few years, COVID changed that process. COVID also had a chance to, for us, and this is the power of the American people. COVID also gave us a chance to wake up. Parents who actually just taking things for granted said, wait a minute, you can't do this to my kid. Business owners, no matter what side of the aisle they're sitting on, say, wait a minute, you can't take away my dream that quickly. We have this ability within our American way to stand up and fight once we know it's a fight to be fought. That's just who we are. Education has been my passion. Again, I grew up in a community where, and I have to say this, so those who heard me say this before, please bear with me, because so many Americans don't know this, and it's so important to know this. Because of those commitments of faith, family, free market education, my community, as a kid, what I grew up in, not meeting or talking with a white American until 16 years old, we led our country to growth in the middle class, led our country in men matriculating from college, led our country in men committed to marriage. Up to 1970, black women had a higher percentage of marriage than white women did. And we led our country in the percentage of business ownership. So how did I grow up? Proud to be an American. Excited about the challenges. Told that if you want to be a successful young man, it's real simple. Learn to love God, country, family, respect women and authority. It's really simple. And that community I grew up in was awesome. It was what allowed me to go into the other communities when I was finally getting integration and feel comfortable and confident that we can overcome. Because we knew that to command respect, first of all, you don't beg for it, you don't ask for it, you command it through meritocracy. You work harder than the next guy, you run harder than the next guy. If they try to bully you, you fight them, believe it or not. We were taught to fight. I mean, it's amazing. Jeez. Amazing. That being said, it was a remarkable place to grow up. So the only thing I knew as I got into this new journey, which I never thought I'd do, was education. Had to be my legacy. And thank goodness we have a conference that education is our priority. We now have a country in which we realize that education is the only way to maintain our freedom. We just had this this hearing. You guys are seeing what's going on in our college campuses. our kids are being taught to hate everybody because we have these college educators who are racist, Marxists, hate our country, and they're putting everything they can to make sure our kids feel the same way they come out. Anti-Semitism, anti-black. You have MIT that has dormitories in which black people stay, but nobody else can. Now, if I remember correctly, that's the way it was back in the 60s. It's called segregation. Now they call it affinity dorming. I think George Washington, who's the Wallace? George Wallace should not have said segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. He should have said affinity dorms today, affinity dorms tomorrow. If he just changed his language, because that's what they're trying to do on us. Anyway, if for those who did not see that hearing, please do. It's a game changer. Our country is going to go in a different direction just because of it, because now the American people are awake. Let's just wrap up with a couple of things here, but we just came back from the border. I just want to speak to that real quickly. I was there 2.5 years ago. And I remember one of the things that I spoke about was this little girl, 7 years little girl. And by the way, it was chaos. There were people everywhere. There were kids in little segments all over the place. And it just happened to, as we were talking with the Border Patrol, continued to glance over, and I saw this little girl, she was crying. And somebody mentioned she's autistic. She cannot explain anything about her. She didn't come with her parents. She was one of those unaccompanied children. And she's been crying for 2 weeks. What is unfortunate is this is a symbol of how heartless this administration is. Because it's not that little girl anymore, just a few unaccompanied kids. There's over 100,000 of them that have been lost by this system, through these people. I call it evil myself. They're lost. They have no idea where they are. Sex trafficking is on the rise. Human trafficking, that's basically what it is, by the way. You know, we thought we might have passed this thing back in the 1800s. No, Democratic Party is still doing it. A slave trade of sex, labor, and it's all to overwhelm our system. And by the way, my friends, it's happening right here in Utah. Look at your school systems, that all of a sudden, hundreds of kids come in that can't speak the language. Without the resources we need, we are the state that believes in balancing a budget. We look at our budget every year and we look at how can we help as many people as possible, and we budget to make sure it works so the rest of our community can still be given the support they need. When they're busing, and by the way, don't blame Abbott. Abbott, thank goodness, he's showing everybody what's going on, but this was going on from the very beginning by the Biden administration. 2.5 years ago, these people coming in under that bridge, and they'll put them on the bus, put them on a plane. They were shooting out all across our country. It's just that Governor Abbott finally showed everybody that these guys are hypocrites. They're sanctuary cities until they don't want to be. When all of a sudden they got to take care of people, and their people are getting upset with them. So know that what's happening today is on purpose. Know that. Personally, anyone that actively, and we need to look at everything across the board, give us a majority in the House that really makes a difference, so we're not sitting there fighting with each other because of 3 or 4 people. Give us a majority. Give us a Senate that is truly run by conservative Republicans, and give us a president who loves our country, my friends, and we're going to clean this thing up. We can look at all these people. We're going to look at all these folks, these NGOs who's making profits. The cartel that's been empowered to make, at Eagle Point, $13 million per week they're making, because people have to pay, based on the country they come from, to come across the border. We get there, by the way, 2 or 3 days before How are we doing, Holly? How are we doing with time? Okay. Okay. 2 or 3 weeks before we get there, the location supposed to handle 1,000 people coming through processing. It was between 3,000 to 6,000 per day. The 1,400 border patrols that normally should be out there doing their job, they're all in processing. 2 or 3 days before we get there. What happens the day we show up? 60 of us, because we couldn't keep it a secret, because everybody knows, including the Biden administration, the place was immaculately cleaned up. It was, man, it was so clean and spacious. I think they had 200 people in the entire facility. We go to that bridge you guys have seen all over the place. I really didn't recognize it. We rolled up, I said, is that the Mexican border over there? Why I didn't recognize it? Because I didn't see any people. There was nobody. No trash, no nothing. So I said, this can't be the same place I've been seeing over on Fox all these months. Well, it was. So what does that say to me? Number one is that Biden knows exactly what he's doing. He doesn't want you guys to know. The cartel also know what we're doing, because no one was being sent over that same. There was about maybe 4 or 5 people showed up in the time we were there. So what does that say about the cartel, about the Biden administration? Think about it. Is that somebody who loves our country or somebody who hates our country? By the way, I'm going to have to make this point. I said the exact same things 2.5 years ago. Exact same thing. I said we're being invaded. We need to ensure people come here, understand our country, our culture, love our nation, can assimilate, so they can give back instead of taking. Guess what the Salt Lake Trib said? I was a KKK member. I was a white supremacist. That's the type of thing we're fighting against, my friends. There are people who listen to those people who don't know what you hear when you come to Eagles Forum. So no, we have to be patient. We have to be understanding that folks need to be educated, and we have to get that done. Let me just say this before I wrap this up. Each and every one of us have talents. When I talk about the Raiders the year I played there, we were underdogs, but boy, we had so many talented people all over the place. We had a guy's name was Ray Guy. Ray Guy was a punter. Ray Guy would come in 3 times a game and kick from our 10-yard line to their 10-yard line. Change the game overnight. And you go through every position the same way. Now, the difference in this year was that we came to that team, so many of us, so frustrated about not winning that we didn't care about ourselves anymore. We cared about the team. What does the team need? I don't care about the headlines. I don't care who makes the interception. The team needs to win week by week. And that's what our goal was. Because we had such a unified team, such a fun team, that somebody stood up when the time came to make it work. All these little talents, a punt returner guy, a quarterback, a receiver, would stand up at the right time. What happened the next year? Same team, different attitude, because we had Super Bowl rings. Man, we show up, boy, all cocky. We got our ring. Oh, my goodness. Talk about being self-centered. I want the credit. I want the credit. We went to the very bottom of our division, from top to bottom, because of attitude. We have talents in this room, my friends, across this country. Whatever it might be, appreciate it and use it. It could be just the person that gives a smile to someone who just had a question that might not understand the way we do, but because we were nice, they are willing to come and ask more questions. And before you know it, they are voting in a way that's going to save our nation. So never put down your talent. Know that you're here for a reason. It's all part of the mosaic, and it's all very, very important, each and every one of us. So know this, as I wrap this up. As crazy as things are today, I've never been more excited about our country than I am today. Now, why is that? Because all the years of frustration I've seen, things not happening, what I do know now is the American people are awake. The American people are engaged. We're talking like we never have talked before. On both sides of the aisle, by the way. Because that's what it does. When we, the people, start talking, there's nothing more powerful than that. We're doing exactly the opposite of what the other side wants. They want divisiveness against segregation. We want unity, conversations, respect, disagreements, but with the same end game. And we're getting there, my friends. So hang in there. Keep doing what you're doing. This is so important. And I always feel uplifted and energized when I come to hang out with you guys, because this is really what we need across our country a lot more of. And I appreciate you guys doing it. So thanks so much. As Al Davis would say, in the old days, for those who still remember him, this older crowd, you guys will still remember him. He would say, just win, baby. So let's get it done, okay? Okay.
Thank you so much, Burgess. And now we get to hear from our new Congresswoman. And, I didn't know Celeste before all of this, and we were looking at all the candidates, and I saw that my good friend Rob Bishop had endorsed Celeste, and I thought, well, I've always trusted Rob, but I got to call and ask him why. If you don't know somebody, you got to know why. And so I called Celeste called Rob, and I said, why are you endorsing her? You can come on up. And his first thing was federal lands. And you know how he feels about lands. And so he said, this is the expert. So we get to hear from her today. Thank you so much.
I'm really excited to be here, and I'm sorry I'm late. It turns out I have a lot of responsibilities now, and I'm late almost everywhere I go. So thank you for being flexible and being willing to switch around for me. I haven't been able to listen to the other speeches. I know my good friend Phil Lyman spoke, and I just caught the end of Congressman Owens. So I feel like I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage, but there are a couple of things I know. I know I'm the last speaker before lunch, so I know that nobody's gonna be mad if I end early, and nobody's gonna be listening to anything I say anyway. So it takes some of the pressure off. I've been a member of Congress for I think 38 days now, and yeah, I won't be the newest member of Congress for much longer because of the special election in New York. But I thought I'll tell you a little bit about what I've done and what I've learned so far, and then I want to talk about federalism and government overreach because that's why I'm here. So I got sworn in on November 28th, and that was one of the most perfect experiences I've ever had in my life. Most things don't live up to your expectations, and that really exceeded mine. And standing there on the House floor and looking out at all of my new colleagues, I really felt the weight of what I'm doing. I want to do this because I want to really represent people in Utah well. And looking at all of these people I've seen on the news a lot, who've been there for a long time, I realized what a big job that is. There are some people in Congress who've been there for decades, and it's gonna be tough to change doing things the way we've always done things when a lot of the same people are still there. But as I've watched, especially while I was in the middle of my campaign, I wasn't there during the 10-week marathon where they were in session and trying to choose a speaker. I was out campaigning. And so I got there, and everybody else is exhausted. They've been through really an ordeal. Being in session for 10 weeks is really, it's tough on members, it's tough on staff. It was fairly tough on America. But getting to watch that from the sidelines and then be there right in the aftermath, I keep making this argument that, as Republicans, it's kind of embarrassing. All we have is the House. We have a really small majority in the House, and we spend all of our time fighting each other. But if you drill down past the personalities, sorry, this is picking up a lot of me breathing. When you watch the news, they talk about the big personalities, and they talk about who's who. If you drill past that, the conversations we're having are really, really foundational right now. We're debating in the House what regular order means, how we should be voting on bills, how the American public should be involved in what we're doing, how transparent we should be, what we should be spending, how we should account for what we're spending. And I am really excited to be in Congress while we're having those conversations. I think we're at one of those moments where things are gonna change drastically. You've probably seen a lot of people are retiring. There are going to be a lot of new faces in Congress in a year. And the things we're debating are, what is Congress's role? What does the Constitution tell us we should be doing? So I just want to make the case for hanging in there, being optimistic. I know a 3-vote majority in the House doesn't feel like much of a line for us to be able to hold against some of the things that are happening in Washington, but I do think it's going to get us to a better place than where we've been. I think Congress is going to be doing a better job of its job. I think we're going to be more transparent. I think we're going to be returning to more of a regular order, passing spending bills on time. At least those are the conversations we're having. And that's what I'm trying to spend my time and energy doing, is representing Utah's values and being a voice in those conversations for, let's get to regular order. Let's make sure people know what we're doing. Let's be the kind of Congress people want us to be, not the kind of Congress people think we are. I'm on the Small Business Committee and on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. And the very first Transportation and Infrastructure hearing that I was in, the subcommittee chairman, Rick Crawford, who is an appropriator, was having a back and forth with the Department of Transportation about greenhouse gas reporting. And he was saying, why are you requiring this on transportation projects? And they were saying, well, we just think it's a good idea. And he kept saying, it's not required by law, it's expensive. Why are you requiring it? And I just scribbled him a little note and passed it up that said, let's defund their efforts. And as a candidate, this is what I talked about on the campaign trail all the time. Congress has ceded too much authority to the executive branch. The executive branch is doing a lot of things we don't like, and then we campaign on it, and we say we don't like these things the executive branch is doing, but we hold the purse strings. If they don't have funding to do these things, they can't do them. So instead of railing against them, let's stop them. And thank you. And that spurred a conversation with my colleagues about just stripping the funding from some of these things. And then I was walking to the floor to vote one day, and I got a text from a friend in St. George who's an accountant, and he said, there's these reporting requirements, they're gonna go into effect in January, they're gonna bankrupt a lot of businesses, they don't accomplish anything, what can we do to stop it? And I walked down to the House floor, sat next to a friend of mine who I sit next to when I vote. Turns out he's on the relevant committee, and I showed him the text, and he said, we just had a hearing on this. And I said, let's defund the rule. He said, that sounds like a great idea. Let's write a bill together. So that started another conversation. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, even though I'm brand new and I haven't been there very long, I am working already on making good on my threats of defunding things that agencies are doing that they shouldn't do. And my colleagues are very receptive to that. So I think there's reason to be optimistic. I think we're at a moment, a pivotal moment, and I think we're pivoting in the right direction. So I'm here right before lunch to tell you I think there's a lot of good news. It doesn't feel like it right now with the administration we have and not having the Senate, but the House is doing a decent job of holding the line, considering what we have to work with. And being in such a small majority is forcing us to have these difficult conversations. And the winners out of this are going to be the American people. So I'm still new enough that I feel very blessed to be here. It's a huge honor, even to be standing here right now and talking to all of you. I wish I could stay longer. I have other responsibilities I have to leave. But thank you for letting me come speak to you. Please don't lose your optimism. I'll quote my friend Burgess Owens, we need to just win, baby. We need more Republicans. We need more Republicans who want to be part of these conversations. And we need organizations like the Eagle Forum to give us backup and keep everybody on the right track. So thank you for letting me be here. Happy New Year.
So we're going to be able to take a break now, and then also you can pick up your lunch and come back in here to eat your lunch. And, and then after, well, while you're still eating lunch, probably you're going to hear from Rob Bishop. So you're going to want to be back in here, and we have some other really great things that we're doing. So, but here's the thing, don't leave this room yet, or you may not get your lunch. So if you leave before you get the instructions, because your ticket for lunch is in your badge that you have on the back of it. You pull that out, and you're supposed to put your name and email address on that, and you turn that in. That's the way we can keep track of all this today. So then you turn that in to get your lunch. So pull that ticket out. Okay, and David has something else. Oh, change. So now, what does that mean, though, David? How do you bring them in where? Yeah, but where are you going to put them? Well, don't they want to pick what they want? I'm just advocating for you, okay? So that you get the lunch you want. So, but you're not going to go get your lunch out there. They're going to bring it in. So before they bring lunches in, if you need to take, let's take a break. Let's take it, David. We're going to take about a 10-minute break before we bring the lunches in, so that people have the opportunity to go outside, and otherwise they won't be here to pick out their lunch. So take your 10-minute break right now, and we'll see as you come back in. Then we will bring the lunches in, and you can pick the lunch that you want. Thank you.